And
Right.
a guy called Zeus Karavela, who I quoted in an article, who's an analyst, said
Great
this
name.
is a silly way of
I was
looking
going
at
to
it
say, Zeus?
because he said this is a ridiculous way of looking at it, because you could pretty much add any company to Cisco, and because Cisco's market share is so big, say that there's a duopoly.
I see.
It'd be like two tiny little RAN companies in North America merging, and the DOJ going, well, when they merge, Ericsson and that company
So-
will have a combined market share of 65%.
What share of the US Wi-Fi market? Hello and welcome back to the telecoms.com podcast, which we haven't done for a while, and that's, for once, it's not Pierre's fault.
Oh,
It's my fault for going on holiday. So I'm wearing the obligatory white T-shirt, of course.
They usually have a rock T-shirt on, though. Not
Yeah,
after holidays.
none of them were clean because I just come back from holiday, innit?
Yeah.
So I just went with a normal white T-shirt, and because those are the rules.
Yeah.
You know, I don't make the rules; those are the rules.
Or a blue one.
Or a blue one, but you haven't been on holiday.
No, I mean, I pretty much wear that all the time, to be honest with you.
It's just your one T-shirt.
Just rinse it out at night.
So where did I go? I hear you ask. Oh, I went to
they know.
I went to northern Spain.
Whereabouts in northern Spain, Scott?
Well, focused on a lovely city called San Sebastian, or in Basque it's called Donostia. So they tend to call it San Sebastian / Donostia. Everything they're quite big on Basque. It's like going to Wales and there's Welsh everywhere.
Yeah, lots of X's.
Yeah, lots of X's and K's.
K's, oh really?
Oh yeah, they're like a K, and that differentiates it because there's no K in Spanish. Do you have K in French?
Yeah. Oh, that's... Wait.
You don't know.
He's not sure.
He's been here too long.
For so long that he's basically become English.
I mean, I guess...
I guess.
Yeah,
not.
yeah, we do have it. It's just not...
But
not
it could be
common.
words that you've just that are just from Alsace that you've borrowed from the Germans or something.
No, it's funny. I was thinking about Elon Musk and ketamine, and we spell it with a K.
Do you know,
All right.
K is very common in Slovak.
Right, yeah.
Like the ich ending that you get in Serbian. And
It's every 3
Croatian is
letters.
Ich, usually.
Right.
It's really common. Anyway.
So they're
sorry,
like
Scott.
X's, they're like K's. And to be honest, no offence to Basque people, it's not a pretty language.
No?
Well, it's just too many consonants.
Isn't it supposed
and too
to be
many
similar
words that
to-
are fucking impossible to pronounce?
Similar to Hungarian and Finnish or something weird. Part of the same language.
There's something going on there.
How
Is it-
can people end up in Finland, Hungary, and northern Spain?
It looks like it's
from
got
the
much
same
more in
language
common
group?
with Central Europe than it does France or Spain,
Right.
linguistically.
The boat made in a scow there and then just carried on.
But I mean, you know, it's only in the past few decades that the Basques have chilled out a bit. They used to have a full Northern Ireland troubles.
Yeah.
They had ETA.
Is that all over now then, or is this?
Yeah, it's pretty chilled. I mean, you get the odd bit of graffiti.
Yeah.
Actually, there was more graffiti that was pro-Palestinian, which I thought we were chatting about it, and we were trying to work out what the link is, other than just the general sympathy that one might have for their plight. And I think it's that
It's the latest cause.
oppressed, but it's the oppressed people thing.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to get people from enclaves that are used to being shat on a bit, empathising even more with them. Anyway, I'm certainly not going to go down that fucking rabbit hole.
No.
But yeah, I would just say as a review, San Sebastian's is just like, it's got everything in one. It's got a brilliant beach, which you saw me sharing pictures
Like a
of,
cove
called La
almost.
Concha. Yeah, that's why it's called La Concha, is a shell, and it's just like a
Didn't look
scallop
too busy
shell.
either. Looked like you managed to get your own little area.
Well, it's
listen to the
big.
cricket.
That's the thing. It's quite busy, but it's big.
Did you have any shade? Or you turned
I
red?
actually bought a sombrilla for €30 and just left it there, but we had about 3 uses out of it. So it's €10 a pop. You know, what the hell?
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, I don't mind, but for my mum and my daughter, they get a bit more stressed out about getting hot. So it's worth it. €30 for a bit of peace and quiet. It's fucking
cheap.
bargain, isn't it?
Cheaper than renting it. Yeah.
And so it's got this lovely beach, and then you've got this lovely old town, just walking distance from the beach. So you go and have a day or an afternoon at the beach, and then you go into the old town and have the pinchos, which is like their signature
Tapas.
food, which is like
Amazing.
tapas. That's typically put on little bits of bread.
Is it better than tapas, pinchos, or
It's more varied.
right?
I would say yes.
I mean, tapas, when you
It's
when
more
you
like
go,
the kind of food they make there, really. Like seared foie and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing. And you did go to the cheesecake place, yeah? How was that?
yeah, Pierre's recommendation, but it's quite well known. A restaurant called La Vigna. And they do this. It's typical of the region. This thing they call like a
Bass cheesecake.
they call it like burnt cheesecake, but just because it's slightly
Charred, yeah.
charred, overcooked on the top. But it's basically cheesecake without any strawberry jam on it or whatever.
No, the ingredients, it's cream, a tablespoon of flour, and then sugar. That's it.
Right. Yeah. Well, it tastes fucking creamy.
It's amazing.
Okay, so those are the ingredients. So I don't know. Normally, cheesecake is actually made with cheese, like ricotta or something.
Yeah, or
like
there's
that.
like a base of something.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. It's
one.
just basically a baked cream pie,
Yeah.
and it is very naughty. So that's
and vanilla. Sorry, they put vanilla.
yeah, put vanilla in. So that's nice and all that, and it's touristy, but not so touristy that you can't enjoy
and did you
yourself.
spend outrageous amounts of money?
I mean, it's all right. We're in a self-catering place about half an hour outside of San Sebastian up in the hills, which was really nice. It was a real change of pace. And so we did a bit of cooking and made sandwiches for lunch. So we probably only went out in the 2.5 weeks we were out there. We probably only went out for about 10 meals or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can spend some money. There was one recommended by my mate Gavs called Casa Julian, which is in a town just down from. We were staying near a town called Villabona. And there's a town just down from there, which is considered one of the most Basque towns, called Tolosa. And they've got this place called Casa Julian, and basically they just do steak.
Yeah.
And you just go in there and they go, look, here are the two bits we got. We got sirloin and we got ribeye. I recommend you get a fuck ton of both of them.
And the fat is really yellow and
yeah, it's really aged and all that sort of thing. Have you been there then?
not to that one, but I've been.
But you know the style,
The Basque steak is
right? They're known for their steaks, are they? But I didn't know that.
chuleta. They call
Yeah, and what they do, and they do it on a proper barbecue. And it's great big, massive sort of cut of beef, and then they chop it into slices, and you just eat it. And my wife, who's not that, and they serve it quite rare. My wife's not into rare steak, but she fucking loved it because they do it so well and they season it just right and all that sort of thing. You barely have anything else with it except for these little baked red peppers that they do, which are a signature thing. Anyway, if you're in that area, Casa Julian and Tolosa, I recommend that. La Viña cheesecake in the old town of San Sebastian. And just the whole region's pretty cool. We drove around a little bit. We went to Pamplona before the San Fermin festival, which is a bull run thing. It was all right. It wasn't as cute as San Sebastian.
Didn't fancy joining in the running of the bull spot?
Not much. If I ever had those
Swinging off
days, they're behind me.
People leap up, don't they, as they go underneath them? And
Yeah,
all
yeah.
those poles coming out the walls.
Yeah, it's a
Seems a
weird,
bit
it's a weird
risky.
thing. I mean, we went there in advance and we could see it was all getting set up for the TV. For that moment that everyone secretly wants to see, which
There's always
is some poor bastard
who's got really hurt. Yeah.
getting fucked up by a bull. And we went to Bilbao and went to the Guggenheim Museum, which is an amazing building, but the art didn't do a lot for me. I'm not very good at art in general. So there was mixtures of sort of abstract sculptures and abstract paintings, and it's like, right, okay.
The trouble I have with
I
art
could do that.
museums is I walk around them and look at the stuff, and I feel like I should sort of be moved or swept
Just don't
away.
get
somehow.
it,
And
okay?
I just think, and then I told that to someone. They went, "You're just not very educated, are you?"
And did you slap them?
I don't think I did.
Now you're educated. Now you've just been learned.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just abstract stuff. It's stuff that just looks like someone did it in 5 minutes.
I quite like Salvador Dali's weirdness.
Yeah,
'cause
I like that.
That's abstract, but it looks like there's some skill involved.
Well, then there's something to see, like some melting clock or something.
Yeah, I quite like
That's
that sort of thing.
interesting.
It's pretty good, I think.
And I like Impressionists, a bit of Monet or whatever,
Yeah, I
but,
like that.
but not this pure abstract
No.
stuff. I can't handle it.
No. And how was the telecom coverage in north of Spain?
It was
There's the segue.
We had to do some.
It was a
telecom.
bit patchy on La Concha Beach when I was trying to stream Test Match Special. By the way, I found out a hack with BBC. If you're on Wi-Fi, it geofences it and it won't let you use like BBC audio or video.
Right.
But for some reason, when you're on cellular, the geofencing doesn't apply, even though it's obvious which country you're in because you're roaming. However they do it, you basically have to just turn off Wi-Fi if you want to listen to TMS on the internet.
Interesting.
But yeah, got to listen to a test match or two. Got a bit of sunburn on my back on the last day we went to the beach because I was bored of just lying around in the sand, so I just paced up and down the beach, listening to the cricket, and insufficiently protected my back. But there we go.
Yeah, you look a bit red. Ready.
Yeah, well, I tend to go red first, then brown, or just back to white. So yeah, that's it. I won't prattle on too much more about it, but I definitely recommend it. It's a slightly more adventurous thing because it's difficult to get accommodation in the town of San Sebastian. So if you want self catering and you can't afford hotels and that sort of thing, you have to shop around a little bit, but it's really worth it, and it's a different kind of holiday. There's a lot of culture, a hell of a lot of cuisine.
Yeah.
I must say the supermarkets compared to French supermarkets aren't as fun. I mean, on the whole, notwithstanding, I mean, that's probably the best part of Spain for food is that bit I was in.
Yeah.
But having been to France last year, France still kicks ass on that.
Yeah, France is good for food. It has to be
And just
said.
the supermarkets you go in there, it's
Yeah,
like
they're
fucking
good.
Aladdin's cave, man.
Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah.
So,
France is better than Italy for food as well, I think. I know people like go on about Italian food and how wonderful it is, and it's all, it's all different in each region of Italy, but I still think France is better than Italy.
Well, France is a bit more sophisticated and a bit more varied.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I think France can get a bit up its own arse with food, and you're like, just
Yeah.
do me a steak and shut up. But you can't really fault them on the whole.
No.
I mean, I remember years ago, I went with my dad, who was a military historian. We went to the Western Front of the First World War, and I think we were near Verdun, and just went to a random restaurant in a village, off the beaten track, and just had the menu for however much. I can't remember whether it was still francs or
the
euros.
daily menu, don't they?
Yeah, daily
3
menu for
courses.
about 15 quid.
Yeah.
And all the courses and the wine and everything's just lush. And you're like, great.
Yeah.
I can just keep
It's like
doing
menu
this.
du vin euro,
Yeah.
isn't it? And it's
We did go to one place on the last day called Zirta, which is up in the hills, the beautiful hills back inland from San Sebastian. And that was nice. And they did a menu of the day. And for 18 euros a head, they gave us 3 courses and a whole bottle of rosé.
That's brilliant.
We couldn't even drink it or I wouldn't have been able to drive.
wow.
So yeah, ZIRTA. Check that one out if you're in the region. Okay, so that's enough travel stuff. What have you been up to in 3
Just
weeks?
been slogging it out while you've been enjoying yourself. I've been enviously looking at your Facebook photos, thinking, "Oh, he's staying in quite a nice looking place, and the beach looks good." And that's pretty much all I've been doing. There have been a couple of outings that you missed.
Yeah.
So there was
So-
the Babels. So thank you to Should say thank you to Babel while we're
Yeah.
on it. We always like to do the shout outs. They did their standard summer sort of rooftop party.
Yeah, was the weather? Did the
It was
weather deliver?
baking.
Oh,
It
lovely.
was really hot. It was one of those really hot days.
Okay,
And
it just makes you drink even more.
yeah, I ran there. Well, I ran
Ooh.
part of it. I thought I finished
weird.
early, and it was like
You thought I'm not with Scott. I could shake off my.
I mean, I'm really
my
unfit at the
shackles.
moment, so I thought I need to start doing something. And,
Funny time to
six
get
and a
back
half
on the horse.
miles door to door. So I ran half of it and walked the rest.
Oh, from your house to
Yeah,
there? Right.
met Andrew for. I thought Magda's like, you can't run, you're going to end up sweaty and stinky. And I thought, well, if I have a shower first, then everybody's going to be sweating because it's
Put on-
hot anyway.
Use a whole tin of deodorant.
Wander around in a circle before I go in to dry off and have a beer, and it'll be okay. So I did that, but it was really hot, and it was good turnout.
Cool.
And I didn't know a lot of the people there because they obviously cover more than
Yeah, yeah.
telecoms, but the usual suspects from the
From our lot.
from the telecom
Yeah.
trade crowd were there. So Ray came. Actually, Ray hasn't been, I don't think, for years, if ever.
Right.
So it's good to see him there. Keith was there. James, the usual suspects, and yeah, they were good hosts as usual. You won't be surprised to hear that I think Teresa and I were pretty much among the last to leave
Among the last.
after having done a few rounds of table football with
Okay,
people from
good
Babel who were
skills.
just outrageously good at it. So it's
Right.
not even worth bothering, really.
Table football.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah, well, Paul Campbell, who will probably now hear that he's been called out, is very good at it.
Right.
But there's a young girl they've recruited here. I cannot remember her name because it was so late at night, and it's kind of annoying.
She was
I can't
kicking
remember,
ass.
but she was absolutely unbelievable at
Is
table
that
football.
like the slopping
Yeah.
table?
No, it's just
No, just the normal, you flip it with
foosball, you mean? Sorry.
Foosball, yeah.
I thought you
We
meant
don't like
like...
table
but,
football.
but who calls it foosball? That's like, is
Sorry,
that like American
maybe.
thing.
Yeah.
or
No, that's...
European?
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, that.
Sorry, I thought you meant like what the Brazilians are good at. Yeah.
Oh, the things that they sort of like ping pong with kicking it with your feet.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and they look... They
Yeah, I don't know how to
flash
do
it,
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always women who seem to be doing it as well. It doesn't seem to be a
Amazing,
men's
yeah.
thing. But
Yeah.
and then there was Huawei's summer reception
Right.
as well.
Was that a laugh?
So that was last. So thanks to Ben and Hazel and everyone like that. It was a pretty swanky place, unsurprisingly, because they normally do these things at.
Was it
and-
cocktails?
There were cocktails.
Dangerous.
There weren't. They were sort of prescribed cocktails. You couldn't just go and order yourself
Right.
an old fashioned or a Negroni.
Did they try that, giving them like topical names?
I can't
like-
remember.
like
there
a
was one time
5G
they had
surprise or something?
No, I don't think they did. It
Right.
was a bit more
Good,
normal
because
than that.
you were
Yeah.
wise, Ben Hazel, to
Maybe they took
resist
your
that
feedback.
temptation. Yeah.
But that was,
I thought
that
they're
was
just going
fun.
to take a piss on the podcast if we do.
And yeah, Andrew was there as well, obviously from telecoms.com. He was also at the
Cool.
Babel thing, so it's good to see him because he doesn't make it in as much these
Yeah.
days. But
No, he
yeah, it
lives
was
in
good.
Darkest Bedfordshire.
And then other than that, I think it's just been yeah, I don't think there's been any press conferences or anything like that. It's just
All right.
yeah.
So because I haven't been here and I obviously haven't been writing anything, I'm very much in your hands. So I think we've identified 3 stories / themes that'll be good to bang on about. It was just Ericsson's quarterlies earlier on this week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we always talk about that, and we will again. I see you wrote that their profits soar. Whether that's because they've just consist of Boya Ekholm and some AI.
Well, there you are.
So there we are. And talking about AI, you've written a couple of things about AI, and I'm just in the mood. That was one thing, actually, going somewhere a bit less developed than central London.
Yeah.
And you just see people like the people who own the house we were staying in were also doing their own little agriculture. In fact, the whole thing's called agriturismo. And
that's what they call it in Italy, right?
Yeah.
A few weeks ago.
And they were just growing their own beans and shit like that. And you just have a little look around and you think, look, there's a hell of a lot of the world that's a million miles away from getting automated and embracing AI as a central feature of their life. So I think sometimes, and I'll put a pin in that and come back to it. I think sometimes we need to take a chill pill a little bit with this rush to AI, because I just there's so many parts of the world where it's not going to be relevant at all.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, actually, agriculture is incredibly automated these days compared to what it used to be. Companies like John Deere and the stuff they have. You only have to watch Clarkson's. I mean, I knew this to some extent from watching, from being at IoT conferences in the past when they used to be separated out. And you used to come across John Deere doing presentations, and the automation on their factories and what they can do in terms of measurements through connected technologies and all this stuff. They're actually way ahead of a lot of other sectors. Yeah. And then you watch things like Clarkson's Farm, and he's trying to get to grips with some of this stuff, because he's not even a farmer, obviously. Yeah. I think he could be called a farmer now, actually, but he's not a particularly good one. Hasn't he? Nearly for a couple of years now. He's not a particularly good one. And some of the machinery is just like incredibly complicated and really sophisticated, what it can do. So but I take your point. There's a lot of the world that.
Well, and again, which we'll probably touch on. Let's not rebadge the automation that's been going on for decades. Suddenly rebadge it as AI.
Totally, yeah.
Just because ChatGPT, I saw on TechMeme that ChatGPT has just come out with a thing that basically it's called ChatGPT Agent.
Right.
And according to the Verge headline, which can control an entire computer and perform multi-step tasks powered by a new dedicated model. And then their own link on it is their own release. This was yesterday. Introducing ChatGPT Agent, bridging research and action. ChatGPT now thinks and acts, proactively choosing from a toolbox of agentic skills to complete tasks for you using your own computer. Fuck off, I'll do it myself. Yeah. It's my answer to that.
Well, that was kind of the theme of one of the piece I wrote this week, really.
Good. But, okay, well, I'm already warming to that theme. And then, assuming we have time, we want to do 3 segments. Another big bit of news which happened, I think, at the start of this week was that CityFibre got a ton of money. Yeah,
well, let's do it in that order then, because you sound like you're more interested in talking about the AI stuff, and you can just sort of chip in and be random on that anyway, or is the CityFibre's quite sort of focused thing?
Do you want to start with Ericsson?
Yeah, let's start with Ericsson, because maybe quite a lot to say.
So I think the format's going to be, given that you've been here and I haven't, is that I throw the ball to you and then I just react.
Yeah.
So tell us your headline on Ericsson. I think you've written a couple that involve Ericsson, but this was the quarterly's one. It says, Ericsson targets big Huawei-free places, which sounds like a nice, intriguing twist.
Yeah.
Big Huawei-free places, AI, no Oxford comma, and NATO as profits soar.
Don't use the Oxford comma.
You don't do the Oxford.
That's rubbish.
I've thought about it, and the reason I do it is, and I think that the reason it exists,
I only do it in certain circumstances, like if it's confusing otherwise.
Yeah, well, I think it's always slightly disambiguous in so much as, I'm not in this case, there's nothing confusing about what you've written, but Huawei for places, comma, AI, you could read it, comma, AI and NATO.
Yeah.
Whereas AI, comma, and NATO shows that you're not pairing AI and NATO, they're just successive things in a list. I think that's the argument in favour of the Oxford comma.
Right.
Anyway. But those are the 3 things it's targeting.
That's an argument. I'm not sure I get along with that Oxford comma argument, but it's also called. I don't like the way it's called the Oxford comma and the Harvard comma.
Oh, I haven't heard the Harvard comma.
So you think, it's the Oxford comma, it's the Brits' way of doing things, but actually it's mainly used, and one of the reasons I don't like using it is because it's very American.
I see.
And as far as I'm concerned, we need less American in the world at the moment.
So it's called the Oxford Comma, but it's a Yang thing.
I noticed that
They've probably got plenty of Oxfords in America. They're always nicking our place names.
the way if you kind of work at a number of publications or you do a bunch of freelance work, as I've done in the past, I tend to see the Oxford comma or the Harvard comma, whatever you want to call it, being enforced more by American publications than by British publications.
American publications get a bit more into style guides as well, though, don't they?
Yeah, they're a bit obsessed about all that rubbish.
I've heard chat, among ourselves about style guides. It's never, listeners probably won't be surprised to hear that it's never even occurred to me to use a style guide. My style guide is what I fucking feel like writing.
I think as long as you're consistent in the story in question, then you don't need to worry.
No, and I can see how in bigger titles, some kind of continuity of style is desirable.
It can look messy otherwise. I'm probably a bit more pernickety about that sort of thing than you are, because I did work for as a copy editor for a while.
Right.
Years and years ago when I was about 22 or
yeah,
something.
Part of it is laziness. Like sometimes I try and standardize how we write things like Wi-Fi or whatever, and then someone does it differently, and I think I just don't fucking care.
Yeah. Well, it shouldn't be your job.
But anyway, I will argue in the great debate about the Oxford comma. I'll be pro it and you be anti it. I think it does serve some disambiguous or
we should ask
function.
We should ask Boy Echo what he thinks of it. I think next time we get the opportunity to interview Boya.
I think Oxford comma will be quite a gratifying thing to hear pronounced in a Swedish accent as well.
I also think it wouldn't be the opening question he'd expect. What do you think of the Oxford comma? It would really kind of take him aback, and then you could launch in there with something about, aha, so are you really as good as Huawei?
Are you taking the piss, Ian? Okay, so you didn't ask him that.
I didn't get a chance to ask him anything.
Yet again, in my absence, you missed a trick.
I did interview Per Narvinger, who's probably number what?
He's the new quarterly guy, isn't he?
If we count Ekholm and I can't even remember the CFO's name because he's quite new in the role.
Oh right.
But if we count them as 1 and 2, I'd say Per Narvinger is probably
right up there.
Number 3 in the company.
He's the new
the new head of networks, which is pretty much like 2/3 of their revenues, I think.
I wonder if Frederick still listens to the pod, or if indeed he ever did.
Well, I think he might still be there because they go off into an advisory role for about 2 years or something when they get caught up in the redundancy process or whatever it is. And I don't know if he was caught up in a redundancy process.
I want to be an advisor for 2 years. Yeah. Anyone who wants me to advise for 2 years, I'm up for it. Anyway, so having spent far longer than we should have dwelling on your headline, why don't you flesh it out for us?
Yeah, I mean, there's not the results. I think Ericsson's results for the last few quarters have been showing the same thing, really, which is quite flat sales, or like maybe up a bit, maybe down a bit, depending a lot of the time on actual foreign currency movements. So I think this time round it was down. I think reported it was down 6%. I'm not looking at the story, so that might be slightly off.
Hold on.
I think the headline was down 6% reported, and I think a lot of that was to do with sort of weakening of the US dollar. And then on an organic basis,
you're correct.
I think on an organic basis they were up about 2%.
Yeah, so I call it adjusted for adjustments.
Adjusted for adjustment. Yeah, well, it's just
organic
on a like-for-like, isn't
up
it?
2%. Yeah, you're correct on both those data points.
So which is I think's been the story now for a few quarters, and the main factors in that are we're in a little bit of we're kind of coming out, I think, actually a bit of a downturn in 5G equipment sales. So Ericsson's obviously biggest 5G kit vendor outside China, and it's much more dependent on 5G RAN sales than its closest rival Nokia. It's, as I say, it's kind of 2/3 of the business is that, really. So they've been quite hard hit by this drop in demand for 5G radio access network equipment. If you go back to, so this is citing Omdia's figures, which is our sister company. So, and they're pretty good as well, fortunately. So,
so it'd be a bit awkward if they were shite.
If they were shite, I wouldn't even mention them. I
wonder if Evan ever listens to this podcast. I mean, he used to when he was our line manager. Evan, for people who don't know, is a guy who heads up all the analysts at Omdia. Yeah. But before he got that job, among his burdens was us.
I think he does. Shout out to Evan.
All right, cool.
Evan, yeah. So I think if you go back to 2022, I think according to Omdia, the radio access network market was generated about 45 billion in revenues, and then the next year it was 40 billion, and then last year it was 35 billion. So it's like really big drop-offs.
Right.
And the main consequences, I think the main reasons for that rather are telcos themselves are struggling, obviously, with monetization of 5G. We talk about this all the time, and there's this sort of existential crisis in the industry about where the next sales growth comes from. It all seems to be about cost cutting these days. We're going to talk about this a bit, obviously, with the AI segment. And therefore, they're not really that incentivized to be spending money on a new generation of technology that hasn't really done anything for them, that hasn't really seemed to be that transformative.
Why would you double down on something that isn't
is one of the
off?
messages. And there's a few other factors in there. You know, there's obviously, it's quite cyclical anyway, the way that equipment gets rolled out. So it comes along in 2019, 2020, everybody spends a lot of money on it, and then it kind of tapers off. There was a bit of an inventory build-up, I think, in North America during the kind of post-COVID phase when they could get access to stuff again. And then they basically cut spending a lot in North America.
And presumably during the pandemic, it was a lot harder to get access to masts and actually install the shit.
Yeah, well, I think they were kind of designating critical workers, so I don't know if I don't know if that was as much as a factor as we think it is. But you did have the kind of supply chain gumming up that was going on, I think, which was a bit of an issue for companies. But they seemed to deal with that quite well. But it affected demand in different ways. And then you had so you had this drop off in demand in North America. Fortunately, at that time, India came along and decided that they wanted to spend a lot of money on 5G rollout. And
you say a lot of money, but...
Well, comparatively.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like for like, it's a lot less, isn't it?
Like for like, it's a lot less.
There's a lot of India, but for each bit of kit, they're paying a lot less, aren't they?
Yes. Well, I mean, they won't tell you what their prices are, obviously, per on a like-for-like basis in different parts of the world. But the suspicion is that you spend a lot more in America on equipment.
Well, I think you can take it beyond suspicion. I mean, maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, but you know, if you're actually digging into their figures and you look at margins at a time, look at margins for the networks division at a time when it's heavy on India versus margins when it's heavy on the US, and they tend to be a lot narrower, don't they?
That's the big giveaway. Yeah. India's basically kind of okay. It's good for sales, and maybe not necessarily very good for profit margins. The nice thing at the moment, and that on the profit margins point, is that even though they've got this problem with like headline sales growth, demand has sort of shifted. So the Indian rollout that was happening for a couple of years, maybe not quite that long, but big companies, 3 very big operators in India, at least 2 of them anyway.
The big lot of spending on 5G gear in India seemed to only last about a year, man.
It only lasted about a year. It was done very quickly.
Yeah.
And then it sort of, I mean, I asked Per Narvinger about this. I was like, because they complained about India in this earnings update, actually. They said India's really kind of, nothing's happening in India anymore. And I was like, why is nothing happening in India? And he was like, well, it's often quite choppy in India. It's like they kind of go for something and do it quite fast, and then it goes into a slow phase. But you had Reliance Jio, and you had what's the other one? Bharti Airtel. Yeah. Spending quite a lot of money. I mean, Vodafone Idea is maybe a different. I mean,
they're still alive, but they've been struggling for a long time.
Yeah, but certainly, and I think they are doing investments in 5G now, but certainly, or they were, but the ones that drove it initially were Jio and Bharti Airtel, and that was very good for kind of compensating for the drop-off in North America. What's happened now, more recently, is India's gone dead, and North America's really picked up again, and part of that's to do with Ericsson's success against Nokia in the North American market. So they've again, something we talked about for several podcasts is this swap out of Nokia kit in the AT&T network. And
a big deal from a year or two ago.
A really big deal. And AT&T is having to basically, because it has this idea that it wants to have this horizontal, Ericsson kind of is like the horizontal software that goes through and the management system that goes through the whole network, and then you rely on some Ericsson radios, but you can also put some other ones in there as well. That's their story. I mean, actually, it's pretty single vendor, really. It's very, very heavily reliant on Ericsson.
Yeah, and this comes back to obviously a perennial topic of like Open RAN, and you know, you can have, you know, I remember joking with our freelancers that they talk about it being compliant and compatible, and the joke was those are good qualities in a partner. But Open RAN compliant and compatible. Yeah, you can be Open RAN compliant and compatible, but you can still be single vendor. Yeah. So who fucking cares?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I wrote when you were away, actually, well, I did write a couple of things on Open RAN. You'll be surprised to hear. And one of them was, I mean, the competition now from Open RAN players is so much less, I think, than it was. You know, it's almost like they've both Ericsson and Nokia. I think we might just have talked about this before you went away. The Vanquished.
We talked about
Vanquished.
Mavenir a lot.
Yeah, you know, Mavenir, various other companies in that space have really kind of struggled to establish themselves, and they're now starting retreating from some areas of the RAN market. And obviously that works to Ericsson and Nokia's benefit. But I mean, going back to Ericsson, they basically picked up this work at Nokia's expense, and AT&T's story would be they have been spending quite a lot to take out Nokia radios and put Ericsson ones in there instead. They also have like their big deals with T-Mobile. I think they're about 50% of the T-Mobile network, maybe even more than that. And they're a major kind of partner, like vendor to Verizon.
Yeah,
I think their market share in North America is ridiculously high, by the way. They themselves admit that it's more than 50%. And I think Del Oro said that it's anywhere between 50 and 70%. I found this quite amusing when I was writing recently.
Isn't it about 50% of their revenues as well? Or at least for the network.
Okay. So interestingly, the second quarter, it's 44% of their revenues. The next country on the list, the other big ones, I can't remember what the order is because they're all on about the same percentage of revenues, but they're basically like the UK, India, China, I think still might even be up there, and Japan, and they're all on about 4%. They're all on about 4% of revenue. So the gap between the US and every other, like what Ericsson would call major countries that it's important to be in, is absolutely huge. It's 40% at least in terms of the revenue contribution.
I'm just going to fire up. If I'd been here, I would have written it this week.
If you're in the earnings,
one thing I do is I lean quite heavily on their presentation and do.
Well, if you've got your laptop open, as I can see you have, Scott, and you go to their actual earnings report and you do a search on China, I think there's only a couple of references to China, and the second one shows the revenue contribution from it, and you can see there that it's something like 3 or 4%, and all the other countries that are in that list of top 5 markets, so no one's above, I don't think, 4%. So the US they're ridiculously dependent on the US. And the other thing I thought was a bit odd about this is, you know, I was writing about HPE and Juniper a bit recently because that deal got completed. That might be something that happened while you were on your holiday. I don't know, but that deal eventually went through.
It did happen while I was on holiday.
Yeah,
it went through.
With some concessions that, to me, and I made this quite clear in my headlines, didn't really address the issue that the DOJ said it was concerned about in the first place of market share. They were concerned that a merger of HPE and Juniper would create a dominant player in Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And a lot of analysts pushed back on this, and obviously HPE did, saying this is a bit ridiculous because what they seemed to be doing was adding HPE and Juniper relatively small to Cisco and saying it will produce a duopoly. And a guy called Zeus Karavela, who I quoted in an article, who's an analyst, said this is a silly way of looking at it. Because he said this is a ridiculous way of looking at it because you could pretty much add any company to Cisco, and because Cisco's market share is so big, say that there's a duopoly.
I see.
It would be like 2 tiny little RAN companies in North America merging, and the DOJ going, well, when they merge, Ericsson and that company will have a combined market share of 65%.
What share of the US Wi-Fi market does Cisco have?
Cisco's, well, I don't know their market share of the US market, but I know internationally it's 40%, and Huawei's in the mix internationally, so they're probably quite a bit higher.
Dominant in Wi-Fi. So I completely take your point then.
Juniper's 5%,
yeah,
and HP is 15%.
Right, so that takes them up to 20, which is still, let's say, half of Cisco.
So the comparison I made was it'd be like Mavenir merging with someone in the US, and the DOJ going, after this merger, Ericsson and the new Mavenir will have a combined market share of 70%. It's a duopoly. So I just think it was an absolutely ridiculous way of looking at it. I completely
agree with you that is a stupid way of looking at it.
But they're heavily dependent on the US, and the nice thing about, so to get back to the kind of profit story, the nice thing about this shift in, they call it a mix shift, don't they? The mix shift.
Yeah, mix. I.e. where we flog stuff.
Yeah. So the move from India to North America has been extremely good for profits because, as you were just saying, Scott, it seems that they make more money from equipment, say, from a like-for-like piece of equipment in America than they do in India. Because I don't
think we even need to caveat that.
Because the margins always go up when they do well in America.
Exactly.
So
I think it's pretty much a known thing, even if they haven't shouted it from the roofs.
Yeah, so people might be going, hang on a minute, this seems a bit odd. The reported revenues have gone down 6%. If you look at their gross profit margin at the moment, it's like, I think it's above, and you might have the thing up, but I think it's above 45%, and it went up about 4-point-something percentage points like year on year.
Yeah.
Which is, and the,
adjusted gross margin, 48%.
48%, right. I mean, and then, so the net profit, I think, because they had this big write-down on Vonage last year, I think they made it like something like an $11 billion loss this time last year, and I think it was a $4.4 billion, kroner net profit this time
I was just
round.
looking at their table. I'm looking at their own table
Yeah.
because you don't do what I do, which is get screenshots and whack them into the story. You just rely on the written word. I quite like a bit of visual just to break up.
I sometimes do visuals.
I think I'm pandering to my own shitty attention span. I need a picture every now and then.
No, I agree.
Keep
I think
me
it's
interested.
a good thing to have pictures.
But yeah, EBITDA was up 83% year on year.
Yeah.
They actually did have a net income of plus 0.4 billion in according to their table in Q2 24.
Yeah, well, that's probably not accounting for the impairment charges,
Maybe, yeah.
I think.
But anyway, their net income this time was 4.6 billion. So
Yeah.
that's up like over 1,000%.
Yeah.
So they're a lot more profitable. And then just having a little look. I mean, I'm kind of treading on your toes here, but I'm catching
No,
up.
go for it, because otherwise I'm just talking. So you should have your say.
Gross income was more or less the same, and yet gross margin was up 4 percentage points. And that's because R&D expenses were down $1 billion, and then SG&A. Do you know what SG&A stands for?
Sales, goods, and administrative.
Right, was down another 2 billion. So that was 3 billion of reduced overhead compared to the year ago quarter, which more or less explains the increase on EBITDA.
So you're looking at the presentation. So if you look at the earnings report here, which I've got on my phone, the net loss last time, Q2 2024,
Yeah, I've got that up as well.
was 11 billion kronor.
Oh, that's
What they're
interesting. So why
showing
were they
you
showing that in, the
in your
table?
presentation is probably the figure that doesn't include the impairment charges.
I guess so.
It's the adjusted for adjustments
piss take,
figure,
isn't it?
Scott. But
It does say net income with a little one next to
well,
it.
that's So if you look at that
What's
one,
the
I
little-
suspect it says something about
The
impairments.
little one goes excluding restructuring
There you
charges.
go. Well-
I should have done my job and said that.
Yeah, restructuring.
And the
I mean,
restructuring
it's-
charge is basically laying people off, yeah?
Yeah, but I think the restructuring in that case, I think the big loss this time last year was actually to do with the write-downs that they'd had on Vonage
Right.
at the time, because they had successive
That
write-downs.
counts as
on that.
restructuring, does it?
Well, I suppose it is
Fucking
a
up
kind of
M&A.
financial restructuring, isn't it? But
I guess so. I mean, anything could be restructuring.
yeah,
But anyway, I take your point, and you're right. The net income was minus 11 billion.
I mean the restructuring, by the way, if we're talking about it in terms of cutting staff, has been going on heavily
forever.
over the past year as well. So that's one thing that Eckham said on the call, was quite proudly almost, which is, I think one thing that's becoming quite sinister in the telecom sector, and actually it's probably not just telecom, is that there used to be a time when CEOs were a bit wary of going on about job cuts, because there was this perception maybe that it wasn't the ethical thing to do, and we didn't want to scare people with this stuff that AI and automation is going to take all the jobs. Whereas now they don't seem to worry about it. You know, Alison Kirkby did that interview with the FT where she's like, well, you can probably cut even more jobs thanks to AI. And
so I guess it's a trade-off. I mean, this is going to slightly overlap with our next segment, but that's fine.
yeah,
I guess in their view, it's a trade-off because generally, the street investors, they quite like layoffs, don't they?
the street
Because-
likes layoffs, but the government doesn't, I guess.
Exactly.
Although
So,
the government
that's
now
what I mean
seems
about
to-
a trade-off, where previously they might have thought, let's not piss off the government, let's try and curry favour on regulation or handouts or whatever. Now they're just thinking, fuck it.
Well, do you know
Let's
what?
just-
Also, I think because the government's tone's changed, not in terms of saying we want layoffs, but they're so gung ho about AI.
Yeah.
That these, and what's the
So the
implication?
government has a go at them. You go, well, we're just doing the AI
What's the
stuff that you're always
implication of
going on
AI?
about.
Come on, the implication of AI is that you don't need as many people to do
Yes.
it. That's why it's AI.
It's just
I mean, I don't
automation
care
on
what anybody
steroids,
says
isn't
about
it?
this. Oh, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose it to somebody using AI. That's just stupid, as far as I'm concerned.
Still maintain AI can't do this podcast.
Probably not. Let's hope not. Anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, just going back to Ericsson. So they're people are going to be wondering why the profit improved so much. Obviously, there's the take out all that sort of impairment stuff, restructuring, and the margins themselves tell the story. The gross margin and the operating margin are both up healthily, and that's partly to do with this mix shift going to North America, which is a lot more profitable. It's partly licensing deals, the IPR stuff. I think they've been doing quite well in that area for a while, and that's like pretty much pure profit.
Yeah.
And it's partly to do with cuts, obviously, as we were just saying.
Yeah.
So their workforce, they took 6,000 jobs out in the last year, which is 6% of the workforce. And if you look over the last 2 years, I think they've taken out, I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm not going to say the number, but it's considerably more than that. It's maybe twice as much.
And it's been going on for like 5 years.
It's been going on for 5 years. So, I mean, you think about buying Vonage, has obviously got a couple of thousand people working there. They're quite a company called Katrine. They went through some...
They saved a lot of money when they got rid of Mo Green.
Exactly. They did
What's
actually
his
have...
proper name? Rory Reid?
Rory Reid, yeah, he does.
We reckon he looks like Mo Green.
You don't buy me out, I buy you out.
I do you a favour and look after Fredo. Anyway, and so on. And other Godfather quotes.
Yeah. So he's not there anymore, obviously, with his $32 million a year salary, which is, I think, more than Boyacom was earning.
Yeah, that's
which is
probably
an
one of the
embarrassing
reasons.
thing. Well, you can't go out to the pub, can you, with someone who works for you, who earns more than you? I think that was the reason that he had to go. Basically.
And he goes, get the beers in, Boyer. You cheeky bastard. Get 13 million beers in. Yeah.
Exactly. So he's gone along with a few thousand other people. And obviously not all of that is to do with, in fact, probably very little of it's to do with AI. But the thing I did pick up on was Ecom sort of saying, we think, so he was talking about restructuring costs, and he was saying they're going to be elevated for the rest of the year because of AI.
Ooh. Right. So they're going to get rid of more people because of AI.
Yeah. And then I tried to get Per Narvinger to sort of dish a bit more dirt on that on my interview, but he was quite interesting. He was talking about the way that you can use AI if you're in R&D to do some of the sort of algorithmic stuff that you would that you normally sort of rely on researchers to do. Which is quite scary, I think, that he's talking about these things. What does he call it? Link adaptation, he was saying, which is basically working out how efficient the spectrum is. It's like if you tweak that algorithm, you can get sort of efficiency gains. And he was saying that you can actually use AI to do that and get a 10% efficiency gain.
But that sort of thing is the stuff I find least scary.
Yeah, maybe.
That
because
just feels like current
yeah.
automation taken to the next level. It was when entire tranches of work that was previously done by humans are then replaced by AI. And I know the usual...
Well, there is some of that in there, though. Some of the R&D stuff that they're doing.
Right.
I think the comment that
boffins.
Echo made was that you can even be using AI to do design of networks.
Yeah, well, you look at the figures I was just looking at. They've shaved $1 billion of R&D expense.
Yeah, I didn't go into the R&D stuff, and I thought that was interesting. That was the first kind of drop in R&D spending for a while, because they've always had this tendency to increase it.
Yeah, I mean, it's year on year. It was actually about the same as it was the previous quarter. So sequentially, it's only gone down by 0.1 billion kroner, but annually it's gone down by a whole billion.
Yeah.
So maybe that's plateauing. Maybe their drop off was previous.
I mean, they have. If you look at them over a period of a few years, Ericsson, so what they were spending when Hans Vestberg was in charge on R&D, and what they're spending now, it's a huge difference. It's massively. It's gone up from something like 35 billion Swedish krona to 50 billion Swedish krona a year.
Right.
And let's not forget, by the way, that when Hans Vestberg was there, they were a much more diversified company. Like, they'd gone into TV, they'd gone into some cloud hardware stuff, they've gone into various things that they've sold off since then. So they're much more all about like the radio. I know they've bought Vonage, but really what Vonage is about is supporting the radio access network business, isn't it? There's the follow it on of Vonage, that you get people to use APIs, and you improve revenues across the industry because of these APIs giving you access to whizzy services.
It's a big bet that the future of the radio business is in network exposure.
Network exposure, then
and it may still pay off,
kit.
But it certainly hasn't in the fucking short term. I think we can all agree on that.
And he did. I thought there were quite interesting questions from the analysts on the earnings call this time round. Sometimes you get these sort of pernickety ones about, well, why's your net cash?
Where all they're trying to do is refine their little spreadsheet.
Yeah. Whereas people were asking questions about sort of strategic issues. And I can't remember what the question was, but most of the questions, when they are those pernickety ones these days, the pattern seems to be that the CFO answers them, and then whenever it's, I mean, I suppose this is what you'd expect. Whenever it's something a little bit more strategic,
Big
Ekholm
picture,
chips in. But he had a long sort of not rant, but sort of soliloquy almost about 5G standalone and this network exposure business, and the fact that Europe is like a really long way behind the US and China on things like mid-band rollout. So he was saying the two things.
That's a persistent theme from him.
It's a persistent theme, but I think it's quite interesting. They're trying to. The AI thing, there's two aspects to the AI for Ericsson, I think. There's AI using it to kind of cut costs within the business, like everybody's trying to do. And then there's the kind of
AI to make the network better.
AI to make the network better, but also the idea that AI could help demand for AI could have some sort of impact on network services and basically persuade operators to spend more on Ericsson's equipment, I think is the thing. I think I wrote this when you were away as well on holiday. I did a piece, another sort of William Webb piece, sort of had a chat with him about this idea, because Ericsson made a really big deal in its latest mobility report about the sort of uplink traffic story.
Okay.
The fact that uplink traffic it's been quite small as a percentage of the total, like something like 6% or something.
Right.
And they have this view that AI could make a big change on uplink traffic, and I think the reason for this is Pierre's going to want to get involved here, because it's things like AR and VR headsets like the Vision Pro. I mean, it won't be the Vision Pro, but it might be something that Apple comes out with that looks more like these.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you might have someone who's walking down a high street looking around, and it's taking in the images, the video content, feeding it up to the cloud, and basically making recommendations to you, like, don't eat that.
And people live stream. I mean, we touched on this at the end of the pod we did with Paolo, where he had a pair of those Ray-Bans, and he even took a picture of us with it. And you might just get this whole. I mean, for some reason, I've never really bought into the sort of voyeuristic aspect of the internet, but for some reason, some people they used to call them like life bloggers, and then you get live streamers. Basically, you get people who just sort of share everything. All the time,
like daily bloggers.
Vloggers, and obviously you can imagine that connected glasses with video cameras in them, you just can get people walking around. And obviously they're constantly uploading, so that is plausible. How many people will be doing that?
Well, that was where
also
William pushed
the battery
back.
life. If it's constantly uploading stuff,
You two guys, you should sort of work with William, because he basically said those two things. He said, first of all, like say the demand projections. He was looking at some metrics that you're getting from sales at the moment and extrapolating that to 2030 and saying actually sales are going to be so low compared to smartphones that the actual number of these things in circulation is going to be low anyway. Battery life. Even
if you try with your phone right now, it would.
So even if you had these things switched on and feeding for 24 hours a day, the actual contribution to uplink traffic compared with what people are doing on smartphones already with video calls would be relatively small. The likelihood is that you're going to be doing
people doing a lot of video calls though.
Well, whenever you do a WhatsApp call, if you're doing it on video, there's an uplink stream there that's going on. And I just don't personally, and I know I'm not representative, and the people doing this stuff are probably a generation below me. So the estimate,
but I just never.
In the US,
the estimate's 20 minutes. 20 minutes a day. 20 minutes a day is the average. He was saying, which sounded high to me.
But again, one more thing, and this always comes up when we talk about VR/AR as a driver. How much of this is done out and about versus at home?
Yeah.
Because you're not using mobile networks for most of your
I think he was factoring that in.
Yeah.
But let's say you are out and about, it's still a relatively small part of the day that you're going to be actually upstreaming this stuff.
Let alone doing a video call over 5G. That's my point. His estimates, while you're walking along the street.
I mean, Ericsson's got these estimates in its mobility report that uplink will like the capacity, the demands will go up massively over the next few years, and he obviously. Unsurprising as it's William, because he's quite sceptical about a lot of this stuff. He obviously was at the opposite end of the scale. But the point he also made was a lot of the spectrum that operators have, the FDD spectrum, is equal uplink, downlink. The paired spectrum, and the uplink's just not being used. It's underutilized. It's basically underutilized spectrum. So it's not like there's a huge capacity constraint anyway.
So we should, for people, because I know from when I bump into people, we get quite a lot of people listening to this pod who aren't necessarily industry veterans, who find the pod quite useful for getting up to speed on bits and bobs. Might be worth briefly outlining what FDD and TDD are.
Yeah.
So what is it? Frequency
Division duplex.
division duplex and time division duplex.
Yeah.
So frequency division duplex basically means you got two lanes, one going up, one going down.
Yeah, different frequency channels.
Yeah, different frequency channels. Where time is slightly more clever bit, where the stuff takes it in turns to go up and down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And all sorts of clever algorithms and computation goes on to decide whose turn it is. So it would seem that at
You
a
think
time,
the traffic will be crashing.
yeah,
it's
but
so
it finds a
clever
way
that-
of them just going past each other or whatever. And in that way, you would think, given the download is massively over-representative, that TDD would actually be a more efficient way of doing things.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily ubiquitous. FTD is more commonplace, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's where my knowledge. I mean, so William said FTD accounts for. I think he said it's most telco spectrum.
Yeah. So there must be a reason that I'm not aware of why it's preferred.
But what I don't really know is whether some of the spectrum channels themselves are you forced to do TDD in that block, or is it assigned to TDD?
i.e., that's what the license is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be that it's
So
simple
the
as that.
3.5 gigahertz spectrum always seems to be talked about from a TDD perspective.
Right.
But is that the nature of the spectrum in that? Maybe someone who's listening in, who's an expert on this, can answer. Is it the nature of that spectrum that you have to do it as TDD, or
I can't see why why a spectrum would, unless it was just designated as such by the regulator.
I know exactly the man to ask about this, and I shall be doing so afterwards. But yeah, I don't actually know that.
So your mate.
Yeah, Amit will know.
Yeah.
Amit will know. He'll listen to this pod and probably phone me up
Hi,
after
Amit.
listen to it. But,
I still feel guilty for not giving Amit a shout out after
well, we've given him loads of shout-outs recently.
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
gets cited in a load of light reading articles as well.
Okay, all right. So he's doing all right. All right.
So he's done all right. But yeah, so I've gone off on a massive tangent.
Yeah, yeah.
about that. But yeah, so the questions he was getting asked were interesting in terms of a bit more strategic, I thought, from the analysts. The other one that was really interesting, and that was partly the reason my headline with the NATO reference and the Huawei free places.
Okay.
Ericsson had this target, I think they announced back at their Capital Markets Day in, I don't know when it was, 2021, 2022, of growing market share each year by 1%, which is pretty aggressive if you think about it, because you do that for a few years and all of a sudden you've like massively chomped into somebody else's market share. And,
Indeed.
And they've actually been, since 2017, I mean, this is something that Frederick Yedling, when he was doing Per Narvinger's job, was always going on about. It's like we basically managed to do this since 2017. And obviously over a sustained period of time, and you know, Ecom's been there now since I think 2017. So he's almost like he's almost an old timer, really. Came in saying he was a rookie, but he's almost an old timer.
He can't play that card anymore.
No, it's like a few percentage points market share increase. And one of the analysts said, "Where's this going to come from in future?" Because you've obviously had the success against Nokia in AT&T's network, you know, and maybe there were some opportunities for gains against that company and, you know, other rivals when you first started to see the 5G turnaround happening, and you were considered to be a lot more competitive than you had been, you know, and there was the Huawei swap out stuff that went on in markets like the UK originally. But where's it coming from now? Where's it going to come from? And he gave quite a detailed answer to that. And one of the interesting things he said was that this whole swaps thing in Europe with Huawei isn't an opportunity anymore. He said
done.
Which I almost
Played out.
I almost went with that as a headline, like a more like, because he was almost saying that, and I asked Per Narvinger about this, and he said basically the 5G toolbox that John Strand likes to go on about quite a lot has just not been implemented by a lot of countries. I mean, quite a strident position. Considering a few years ago, they were saying they didn't think there should be these rules against Huawei to penalise them because they didn't want to see them banned in Sweden and then have consequences in China.
Exactly.
I thought it was quite...
But now that China's told them to fuck off anyway, they're not so bothered.
They're not so bothered, and it was a bit more like, well, hang on a minute, all these countries that were under pressure and were maybe sort of, we were thinking there was an opportunity to go in there. Germany's the big one, obviously, the biggest economy in Europe, which is still very, very heavily reliant on Huawei. It was almost like Ecom was saying they don't really see a big opportunity to do anything there now because it's been rolling on for so long.
I always thought that toolbox, I remember when we used to argue a toss with John, probably in a pub rather than on a podcast, and he'd bring up the toolbox, and I'd just be a bit sceptical. I mean, I understand what it said on paper. I just remember writing about it at the time. I thought it was a bit vague. It felt more like guidance than a directive. And whenever you give guidance rather than a directive, you're really counting on people choosing to go along with it rather than being forced to.
Yeah.
And, you know, my feeling always was that I just thought it was a weak initiative.
Yeah.
If they just said, in a more sort of Trumpy way, like no
Well, they-
Huawei or you're fucked.
They sort of did a couple of years after doing it. They sort of Thierry Breton started to get quite annoyed.
And
He
then
was
he
like,
got
we've come
turfed
out with a toolbox, and only 5 countries have gone ahead.
but even
with
then,
it.
they didn't put legislative force
didn't.
into it.
Yeah,
So it's all very well Thierry Breton coming straight out with his coiffure and going, I'm not happy. And then he went too far. I think what killed him off was him trying to censor Twitter, and then Elon Musk throwing his toys out the pram, and then he got, to use an appropriate word that's derived from the French, defenestrated soon after.
yes,
But anyway, the point was, even Thierry Breton, who was among the more assertive, pushy commissioners, he still wasn't putting the force of law there. It was still, you were doing it to not piss off Thierry, which turned out not to be enough.
yeah.
So yeah, but that's interesting. Back to your point, it's interesting that it's being formally acknowledged that that's a bit of a busted
Yeah,
flush.
he was saying it was almost a busted flush, and then obviously they're still facing like sort of price-based competition from Huawei in these regions where they're allowed to operate. So Latin America is a fairly big top issue for that, I think, and obviously the European countries are allowed to go. So then he was like, there's several countries in the world where we think it's really important to be like strong, like strategically important to be strong, and where there's an opportunity to take market share. And then he reeled off this list of countries that he sees as the big opportunities. And unsurprisingly, they're the ones in that list, the top 5 countries by sales, pretty much. You go down that list, excluding China, it's India, the UK, Japan, and maybe Australia, as well as the US.
Yeah, I remember. I covered
Yeah.
that list last time I wrote up their quarterlies. So yeah.
Well, I've covered the list, but I've not heard Ecom actually say that those are the markets where we have to be strong and where there's maybe an opportunity to actually get bigger. And what's interesting about all of those countries is there's no Huawei in any of those countries. Yeah,
yeah.
you know the India's been really really tough against Chinese vendors. Yeah, the UK obviously has, Australia has. Which is, I don't think that is in that list of top 5 countries, but it was on his sort of list of places where
I
it might
can't find
be.
that list anyway.
And then the other one was Japan.
Yeah.
They're all countries where you don't have price-based competition from the Chinese. And this is the interesting thing, is that in today's market of Open RAN, frankly, in terms of diversifying the market being a bit of a failure, there's just a lot less competition there. Omdi's report, they do this like RAN landscape report that Remy Pascal does once a year, and it came out really recently while you were away. And one thing I thought was really interesting about that is the market share held by Ericsson, Huawei, and Nokia has gone up since last year. It's gone up from something like 75% to 77%, and to me that just shows the futility of things like Open RAN as a kind of diversification play on a
I
big
think
scale.
again, harking back to the previous podcast that we did recently, Mavenir's exit, over and above what it means for Mavenir specifically, to me, I just took as a clear statement that this just isn't paying off.
Yeah,
Trying to get into the RAN market, they had a really good go. I mean, fair play to them. They put a lot of money behind it, put a lot of effort behind it. I did a couple of panels for them at Mobile Congress talking about the RAN market and Open RAN, all that
you
stuff.
won't be doing those again.
Guess not, no.
You'll be doing it on the core market next year.
Or they'll just masochistically get me to do one and go, well, that didn't go very fucking well, did it? That's symbolic of what a tough market that is to be in, unless you're one of the big players. And in a lot of places, it's almost a monopoly.
Yeah.
I mean, ZTE has a decent share in China, but last time I checked, Huawei had about 2/3 or something.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what it's like in places where there is total open, i.e. not politically influenced competition, like maybe Latin America or Africa or Middle East, or whatever. But yeah, there's basically just 2 or 3 players, and I don't think we've spoken about it before. I think Nokia's doing really well in a lot of places. You mentioned like NATO and defence. That's one area where they're quite good in. But I still think, and everything you've said so far doesn't change my mind, that Nokia's looking a bit precarious in mobile. Am I wrong to think that?
I don't think, I'm not sure that, so I've spoken to Earl Lum a few times recently, who's been looking at their and he's like much more, he's the guy, by the way, Earl Lum, who sort of first got wind of the kind of, situation in the US with AT&T replacing them.
Yeah.
And he's been a bit negative in the past and perceived to be negative about their radios.
That's
and he
right.
was at the
And with all the fans and all that stuff.
They have a summer thing for analysts, Nokia, and he'd been either at that in person or he'd been online through it, and he was really impressed by the stuff they're coming out with
Fair
at
enough.
the moment. And the other thing is, I
But
think
is that translating to market share and revenue?
I think it might be. It's translating to market share in some countries. I think the ones who are actually a bit more in trouble are Samsung. Personally, is my perception. I mean, I looked again. Omdia's
Because they're the other ones who've had a really big go at it.
So Samsung's market share, you go back 2 years, they're up to sort of nearly 8% market share. They're down to something like 4.5%. They're very, very dependent on a couple of big markets like India, and then as soon as something bad. South Korea, India, and like Verizon, basically, and you get a couple of bad things happening. Like maybe someone's not spending money one year, or Reliance Jio does something like, well, we used Samsung for 4G, but we actually want to go with Ericsson and Nokia in 5G plus our own stuff, and it's a disaster for them.
And Samsung could easily do a Mavenir. They're very
they've got money. That's the difference.
They've got money, but they're very competitive, cutthroat, tightly run organisation. Notwithstanding, I think they've had a few scandals recently with the CEO, haven't they?
Yeah.
But anyway, we won't go there. Partly because I can't remember the details of it.
No,
I
I
don't want to
can't.
get sued.
Yeah.
But they're the sort of company where they might have a look at it and just go, this isn't fucking happening, is it? And just cut it.
They are,
And,
yeah.
and let's just redirect the money onto semiconductors or whatever it is that they choose to do.
Yeah.
Or fridges.
Or fridges, yeah.
I mean, they do so much stuff.
Yeah.
We just bought a Samsung telly. It's very good.
We have a Samsung telly. Yeah.
It's better. The LG one we had before was a bit moody. Sorry for the South Korean competition. But
They're not going to like that.
no, they're not going to like that.
You're going to get You're going to get people writing in again.
From LG. Yeah, well, sorry, that's just my. Listen, we better wrap it up.
Well,
and
I'll
move
say
on.
one more thing because you mentioned NATO, which is the other point that he made, because there was quite a lot of conversation about. It was interesting because I was thinking before the call came on, I'm like interested in writing a piece about military stuff, because it seems like Nokia's been going on about this for ages, like soldiers running along with these little like networks in a box, shooting people while providing connectivity to everybody around them. Probably doesn't happen that way, but and 6G always seems to be associated with military applications. Like the whole ISAC thing sounds very military to me. That kind of sensing stuff,
So
they got asked to think about NATO, about defense spending on the call, and basically he's seeing that. Ecom's seeing that as one of the big growth opportunities. So obviously interesting. Donald Trump, one of his successes has been to get Europe to say, whether it will or not, I don't know, but he's got Europe to say it will spend a lot more on
I saw something on
defence.
BBC News just today, I think, some Eurocrat going, we've been relying on the Yanks for too long.
Yeah, well, that was Germany's. Was it Germany's?
Yeah,
Germany's like chancellor or something.
That's right.
It was like someone senior.
So
Anyway,
not even a Eurocrat. Maybe.
Yeah, but so I looked at the NATO. I went and dug out the NATO documents on what sort of gets spent on defence by members each year, and their estimate at the moment is that across Canada and Europe, Canada and European members are spending about 2.02% of GDP on defence.
And that's up, because they used to moan about them not even
that's
hitting
actually
2%.
gone up. Yeah, and that's so last year I think the figure was something like 450 billion. That works out at.
Right.
So you think about a percentage point,
Big
a
market.
3 percentage point increase last year would boost it up to like
Few bill.
over like $1 trillion, basically. And so it's seriously. It's 400 billion is what they spent on. I mean, he's talking about GDP of these like major European economies. So it's a huge amount.
I must be missing something you're saying. A 3% increase on 400 billion obviously doesn't get us to $1 trillion. What were you saying?
No, you're spending 5% of your GDP.
Oh,
rather
when
than
it
2% of your
right. Sorry.
GDP.
Yeah. Okay, so you're more than doubling. Okay.
Yeah. So you're multiplying that figure by 2.5, basically. Obviously not all of that's, only a bit of that's going to go on connectivity, but Echo.
Yeah, and there's a bit of accounting sleight of hand, but still there's going to be an increase.
Sleight of hands, but it's and obviously I think some countries might not make that anyway. Let's see what happens. It's by 2035, by the way, that target, so it's a long way
Those
ahead.
are handy targets.
But definitely, if I was Ericsson or Nokia and I was thinking where are the growth opportunities, and everybody's on about the need for connectivity in some of these like advanced military applications, that's clearly one of the places to go for,
Agreed.
And if you think that Huawei, by the way, will be doing the same thing for the Chinese military, no doubt.
Oh yeah.
That will spur government interest in a way that you wouldn't see. I mean, telcos is maybe a bad market to go after at the moment because they don't want to spend any money. So go for the military, I say.
Yep. And there's there's literally an arms race, and it provides a handy segue to say there's also a metaphorical arms race going on in AI, which isn't going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah.
Because
This is your handy segue.
it is. Because when people are talking about the balance between just going forward in a sort of with abandon on AI and being more cautious, the geopolitical competition with China is always going to make people throw caution to the wind.
Yeah.
And then also, which is a more direct segue to a story you wrote, the other thing apart from geopolitical competition is going to be the ability to use AI to make your quarterlies look better, i.e. improve your margins, which is ultimately what drives up share price and keeps CEOs in their jobs a bit longer. So they've got all the incentive they need to use AI. Now, as we'll probably get into in a bit, I remain skeptical, and it could be that I'm just being Pollyanna-ish and wishful thinking. But if I am, then nearly everyone else is, because there's hardly any jobs that aren't potentially under threat from AI. But so you wrote a piece just published today.
Shelf stacking isn't under threat from AI, Scott. I think you'll find.
Plumbing.
Oh, mate.
Plumbing's not under threat from AI.
No, shelf stacking.
Electrician.
When you look at
They're not very good. They fuck it up and
the
get
robots,
things,
yeah,
they
but
fall over.
AI will make them better.
Maybe.
You look at some of those fucking Boston Dynamics videos or whatever.
Yeah.
There's things doing backflips.
I'm
But
not
then
sure I believe all of those.
Until they get their
ones.
hands for like electricians and all the cables, they're not gonna. It's gonna be a while.
Yeah, no, you're right. But more intricate stuff. But I think AI plus robotics means that a lot of blue collar jobs are under threat as well. Perhaps it'll take a little longer.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
further down the line. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. The
Well, that's
more-
a shame, isn't it? Because that's my safe haven is to go and do some blue collar training.
right.
You know,
Train
as a 60-year-old.
Trade-
plumber.
trade-
When I've eventually been, but we don't need journalists anymore. I'm going to go and retrain as a plumber, basically.
No, I'm still maintaining that I don't think AI is going to replace the job of gobshite
Oh, you could be an
for
athlete,
a while.
like
An athlete,
a professional
yes.
athlete.
Yeah, I thought about doing that. as
That
well.
cannot be replaced.
I reckon
You
I
don't-
should be a
You
professional.
don't think, with
athlete.
all due respect, that ship might have sailed?
Yeah.
I'm just saying it can. Maybe it should be like
Is there a lot of money for blokes who weigh 100 kilos? Who
You're
are
talking about-
50 to
talk about
do 100
athletes.
meters?
there should be a whole new division like that, like average person sports. Where you
Talk
can-
about athletes. We should give a shout out to your son Rafa, who came and joined us after the last.
Oh, he did.
some
Yeah,
beers
he's just flown to Hungary,
to go and whack some tennis
in
balls
about an
around.
hour ago.
Oh,
To
right.
whack some tennis
Okay.
balls around in
But anyway,
some-
hi Rafa, if you're listening, it was great to meet you. It's the first time I met him.
Yeah.
I heard so much about him. But
Well,
he was cool. He
The
was cool.
tournament he's on Amazon, so we can
right.
watch it on Amazon.
Is it a genius thing still?
No, it's an ITF thing that he's in, I think. There's quite good prize money for it. So
Cool.
but apparently loads of people in Hungary, and he's got a couple of Serbian mates, so they're coming up from Serbia.
Okay, so he's got
they're
an
kind of like-
entourage.
there's like an entourage. He's out for 2 weeks. I probably won't see him before he goes back to the US now. So
Right. He's still got one more year in the US.
one more year in the US. Yeah.
I thought of him when I was following Wimbledon, and there was is it Fernley? There's a guy who's he's done the
good.
US circuit.
Yeah, he's really good. He's like 60
Yeah.
in the world now or something.
Right.
So pretty
Nice
amazing,
one.
really.
Anyway, I won't get you on a tennis tangent, or I'll never retrieve you.
Well, there is a link with the AI in the tennis. Actually,
Okay,
I
well,
wrote a
here we are.
story
Let me cue it up,
Yeah.
and then you take it where you think you need to. So, published today, your headline was "As AI plans to make us stupid," which is an intriguing statement.
Yeah,
Telco jobs keep disappearing.
yeah.
So, what's going on there?
Well, before I get onto that one,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk about tennis even
All right, I tried, audience, and I failed.
because there was an interesting development at Wimbledon this year. If you noticed,
Oh, was it to do with Hawkeye
was-
fucking up?
no, it wasn't to do with
Oh.
it kind of was to do with Hawkeye fucking up. But if you were watching the matches, you might have thought there aren't as many people on the court as there were in previous Wimbledons.
In terms of
What's
like
happened?
balls,
The linesmen,
boys and
yeah.
girls.
The linesmen had gone.
And
All
there's no
those
more
guys
challenge, no more
around the edge of
challenges.
the court who normally look at the edge of the, look at
Right.
to try and
They
determine.
weren't there at all.
They were gone. This, by
So
the
it's
way,
all Hawkeye.
for people who follow tennis, like generally, not outside Wimbledon, this is not a new development at the other slams.
Okay.
They've already done that, and some of the Masters 1000 tournaments
But
have done
that's
that.
like recent. It wasn't there last year, was it?
At Wimbledon, it wasn't there last year.
Yeah.
Well, this is the first year for Wimbledon to
yeah,
have done
right,
it,
right.
but some of the other tournaments have had it in place.
So none of the line calls are made by human beings anymore.
So Hawkeye, the challenge system's gone, it's
Yeah.
disappeared.
Yeah.
every ball that hits the line, basically, if it's over the line, there's an automated line call. It sounds like a person, because what they've done is basically recorded people in the shops saying "out."
Really?
Bolts.
Oh,
hit
it
the
does a
best ones.
pre-recorded out.
There's
does it?
also if it's like a really close call, there's an immediate replay on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to prove it. But
But it wasn't flawless, was it?
well, so this is what happened during one game that Pavlyuchenkova was playing against. I think it might have been against a British player, Sonay Kartal, who did quite well this year.
That's right. Yeah. Rings a bell.
The ball sort of looked like it had sailed across the line, and to Pavlyuchenkova, and yet it wasn't called out by the automated system, and she thought it was in. She thought it was out rather, and the umpire thought it was out as well. But the umpire was scared of overruling the system.
But can you just
So she
show the
didn't.
replay?
Right.
So what they did was they showed what apparently had happened was that someone had accidentally turned off the automated line call system.
Wow.
Someone had switched off the. Now, this sounds very non-telecom relevant, but I'll bring the telecom aspect into it in a minute.
Conspiracy.
Where are you going with this, Mr. Morris?
And also, on some of the other players weren't particularly happy about some of the line calls, even when there hadn't been a situation where it had obviously been turned off for a whole. It was turned off for a whole game accidentally, but there was no human backup at all because
Yeah,
it dispensed with
there
the
we
line
go.
judges. There's no human backup. Some of the other players, Emma Raducanu included, was very dubious about what it was calling on some of the
I saw some
calls.
players being
And the umpires themselves said the training route to become an umpire is that you spend a couple of years at least, probably more than that, as a line judge, and you basically learn the game by being a line judge. If you get rid of line judges, then where do your future umpires come from? Can you see where I'm coming from with the telecom angle on this?
I think I can.
Yeah.
And this is an enduring thing that we talk about, which is with everything getting automated, no one's getting their hands dirty in cabinets
Yeah.
or in knocks
Entry level.
and
Yeah.
just working out how shit runs.
Totally. So if you come to if you talk about things like level 4 autonomous networks that everybody seems to be dead enthusiastic about at the moment, where you've taken out a huge amount of staff that would formerly been doing fairly mundane tasks, and somebody, let's say you have a Sonay Kartal Pavlyuchenkova situation where somebody accidentally flips the button or the system fails for some reason, maybe it's an outage or whatever, and you don't have the staff there anymore to sort of deal with problems. That's one issue. The bigger issue for me is that business that the umpires raised, that if you say, well, Copilot, can GitHub Copilot, whatever it's called, can do 80% of the programming now, and certainly anything that a junior programmer would do. We only need the senior programmers. Where are your senior programmers coming from in the future?
Yeah, exactly.
And that was kind of
that thing I spoke about a while ago on the pod, which was that Anthropic interview. The CEO of Anthropic predicting that there's going to be a fucking carnage among entry-level white-collar jobs.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's not so much us now that are under threat, but it's where does the new journalist come from?
Totally.
Or where does the new programmer or the new telecoms techie or whatever come from? You've got to rise up the ranks, and that it's interesting. In some ways, what they seem to be trying to do when they're training LLMs is a bit like I rewatched Matrix while I was away, and do you remember the bit in the Matrix where Neo, Keanu Reeves, is just starting to come to terms with the fact that he's got to take the lead on kicking ass in the Matrix, and he goes, teach me some shit, and then they put in a program that just teaches him all different martial arts straight away.
I know Kung Fu.
Yeah, I know Kung Fu. There we are.
Classic Keanu Reeves line.
Yeah, I know. He says it in that slightly spaced out Bill and Ted's. I totally know Kung Fu, dude.
That in the classic, whoa.
Whoa. Yeah, exactly. Rad. And that seems to be what they're trying to do. They're trying to fit what is not just, our kids learn for, let's say, the first 20 years of their life in more formal education. But then, as we know, we keep learning. I only got into this business in my 40s. I'll let our audience be the judge of how much I've learned in the intervening 11 years. But I've kept learning something.
Yeah.
So they're trying to replicate this process of decades of learning that humans go through. And obviously we learn all the other stuff like the social stuff and broader context and how to join dots. And, I think we should give a shout out to Jeff Hollingworth. Do you see that LinkedIn thing he put up?
Was that he tried to replicate me?
Yeah. So that was quite cool on LinkedIn. Jeff Hollingworth, who works for Rakuten Symphony, tried to use AI, and he picked Ian and just basically tried to. I mean, it was an exercise. It was a friendly exercise, but he's just trying to get AI to sort of replace Ian and write something in the style of Ian. And then eventually, he made the point, and he even gave me a little sort of consolation shout out that can AI, just the little dots that we join spontaneously ad hoc on this pod, or what either of us do when we're sitting and planning a story and thinking about a story, or even the inspiration behind a story.
Yeah.
All these things can. LLM training precisely replicate that. Now, presumably people like Sam Altman would say it can and do it even better.
Yeah.
And then those of us who are a bit more panicked and a bit more Luddite about it all will be like, no, you can't replace decades of experience and organic learning and all the other peripheral stuff that we know. Our day job's telecoms, but we know about all kinds of other shit as well, don't we?
Yeah.
From books we've read, from interests we have, from conversations we've had, all that sort of thing. So that's the interesting thing about it. And so that's supporting your point. If you dry up the supply at age 20 of people doing that critical bit of learning between 20 and 30, let's say, and that's also a time in your career where you try lots of different shit as well, and you hopefully eventually land on a career that suits your personality and your interests the most. And that can take 20 years. Like, again, I didn't get into journalism. Well, I first got into journalism probably in my mid-30s, so let's say 20 years ago. But an LLM that's trained up with all the knowledge in the world still hasn't gone through that process.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and then there's exactly, if you take those junior people, the people who are sort of the entry level out of it, I think the umpires worry. Umpires, S, comma, was the quality of umpiring in the future won't be as good. So if you extrapolate that to other professions, the quality of senior programmers in the future won't be as good, because somehow you'll just have to try and get them you're picking from a smaller pool, because you've not got that big collection of people going in as junior programmers anymore, because you've got fewer of them. And the implication of that to me is that you're then more heavily reliant on the AI, which to me just sounds like a worrying position to be in. Totally. I mean, maybe some people don't worry about being on AI. I'm sure Sam Altman doesn't, because he says that we shouldn't be worried about it. Why should you worry about AI more than you worry about human error? But I think a human error, there's a certain thing. I think this is the point I was making also with the in the article I wrote about the line calling issue, is that if a line judge makes a mistake on a line call, everybody accepts that nobody in line judging is going to be infallible. You build into your equation a certain amount of human error. In the same way that when you write commission stories, you expect a couple of times a year, maybe someone's going to get a big fact wrong, and there'll have to be some cleanup operation. If a system makes a mistake, we don't know what the reason for that is. It could be some system-wide fault. It could be something like the post office scandal. It could be something like the Fujitsu thing. And I think the other worrying thing about it is that certain people are worryingly prepared to trust technology over humans. And this is exactly what happened in the post office scandal.
And that's what happened in your Wimbledon anecdote. The umpire didn't
was
dare
scared
overrule
to
the fucking computer.
Yeah.
And the post office, by the way, for people listening, we're colleagues with Computer Weekly. And we were just chatting just now to Carl, who's done sort of 99% of the reporting for Computer Weekly on that. And we're definitely going to get him on the pod sometime later in the year. And it's not very telecomsy, but because he's our colleague and because we know him and because it's such a fascinating story and because he was on the front line of it, I think it'll be a really good chat to have. He did
say there was actually a telecom angle to it that was underexplored. So he was sort of keen to
talk
about that.
So we'll do that. But yeah, your point there. So the Fujitsu thing was that, well, the computer says that you're a tea leaf.
Yeah.
For people who aren't familiar with the rhyming slang, it just means thief. And everyone, well, and that's it.
Yeah.
It was judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah.
Was the computer.
Yeah, the computer can't be wrong because computers must always get it right. Yeah. And this is the thing. This is the reason that when they do make a mistake, then it's like, well, it's a system-wide fault. Yeah. which I think is interesting. If it was shown to be getting things wrong in those Emma Raducanu matches where she was sort of complaining about it, maybe there's some issue with the technology. Now, I'm not saying by the way that Hawkeye's fucked.
No, but the thing with the Hawkeye, when they show the replay of the Hawkeye, they show the computerized version.
They do.
So
they do.
So when they show it, it's always right, obviously. But then, what if you compare it to video footage, and then you're like,
maybe it's not quite the same.
But then you need like really crazy high resolution camera to see, because sometimes it's like a pixel of the ball that.
Yeah. Well, when they used to show the Hawkeye replays, the most exciting ones were when it was just shaved in, and we're like, ooh.
But
what if the white line is not exactly straight?
No, it's on grass.
The tennis-specific story I wrote, which was before that one that I think you probably got up, was I did get some pushback on that from Danielle Royston.
Why Telecom's AI nuts should be watching Wimbledon.
Yeah, I did get some pushback on that from Danielle Royston, who's into both tennis and telecom. So quite liked the fact that I'd written about it, but she's obviously quite a big advocate of AI, as unsurprisingly as somebody who's sort of into software and did all that at Stanford and everything. And she sort of raised the possibility that we don't actually need umpires in the future. But to me, that's a very dangerous step to take, because the umpires in tennis are the decision makers, yeah? So if you're talking about replacing umpires in tennis, why aren't you replacing the senior programmers in telecom as well? And that's a big step to take to actually have a telecom network where we don't even have senior programmers. We know that nobody's really involved.
This comes back to a point I made. I think it was when we got Brandon from Mavenir on, where I mentioned the, who decides thing, and I invoked sort of the old statement of like, you don't get fired for buying IBM and that sort of thing. That paradox of, let's say a bad decision gets made and AI was some part of the process. It was some combination of AI and humans. You obviously can't bollock or sack the AI.
Yeah.
So for the humans, when you attack them and go, why did this fuck up happen? The humans are in this dilemma, because let's say AI says do this and they go along with it. Then they can go, well, don't look at me, the fucking AI told me to.
Yeah.
But that might not be a good enough excuse. On the flip side, if AI tells them to do something and they don't do it, and then it fucks up then, and people know they went against the AI, then they're really exposed. So actually the risk averse, the game theory thing to do is to always do what AI says, because then at least your arse is covered.
Yeah.
Because I was just doing what AI told me to, which again just takes the human element out of it. And then one other point I want to make that really alarms me about this, and it comes in with the cost cutting and all that side of it, is redundancy. And you've touched on it once or twice already, and it definitely gets into my favorite topic of Terminator and all that sort of thing. The more and more you rely on AI because it's more efficient and it helps your margins and helps you get rid of people, the less redundancy there is built in. You've just got this one system.
Yeah.
And no fallback. Like Wimbledon didn't have a fallback. They needed to have, and maybe they will. Maybe they'll have, like they have in cricket, they have like a fourth umpire who sits back in a room with screens to review LBW calls and all that sort of thing.
Like VAR.
Yeah, so maybe they'll have that, because you need some kind of redundancy, some kind of system, whether it's human or automated or some combination, that is largely unused, but is there as a second opinion when it's needed. So that's the other thing that concerns me about this, is the lack of redundancy.
Well, the other concern, which is the other piece I wrote, the one that you were saying AI plans to make us all stupid, which is a bit of a cheeky headline.
Yeah.
But it's based on, it's something I've been meaning to write about for a while, actually. I probably alluded to it in earlier pieces, and this is actually quite close to our jobs, by the way. So this is almost getting out the telecom side of things a little bit, but I think it's related to actually a lot of white collar work. Is that these people who rely on ChatGPT and various other things like that a lot are not doing themselves any favors cognitively, according to quite sort of well-known institutions who've carried out research into this. So you had a paper done, I think, by Microsoft Research and Carnegie Mellon University in February, looking at use of ChatGPT and what it means for sort of lighting up various areas, how engaged people are basically in the tasks they're doing. The one that I almost found more interesting was an MIT one that came out really recently, where they took a bunch of people and got them to write essays. And one group was allowed to use like generative AI tools like ChatGPT. One was allowed access to internet search engines. and one group was allowed access to neither. They just had to sort of make do. And then they sort of measured them on various sort of performance scores to do with cognition and problem solving and all this sort of stuff. And the people who were in the brain group, as they called it, basically outperformed the others.
Yeah.
And probably unsurprisingly, I mean, it shouldn't really take researchers to prove this, but the LLM group were the ones who did worst of all. And you can actually see it apparently, sort of.
I'm sure.
If you look at
it
done in a kind of electromagnetic way, what it's doing to bits of the brain. I mean, the headline part of this basically is that AI is making us more stupid.
Yeah, and I believe that, and it's not just in terms of just like pure processing. It's just like thinking on your feet.
Yeah.
Like something I do a bit is sort of live events. Like I host our awards once a year. As I mentioned on a recent podcast, I hosted Nokia's Tech Day, and I've got to stand up there, and I've only got my own personal resources. I've only got what's inside my brain to lean on when I'm stood up there in front of a few hundred people.
Yep.
And that's fine. I've done it a bit now, and I feel quite relaxed and confident doing it. Hopefully not too cocky, because as soon as you get too cocky is when you try and do something funny and no one laughs, and then it all goes horribly wrong.
Yeah.
But I feel really strongly that that it's ideal to have everything you need in your noggin, in your head. I'm pointing to my temple for those listening. And the more you rely on other things, the more crutches you have. To your point that you're making, the less you're completely self-reliant inside your own head. It's almost like backpacking versus relying on hotels or tour leaders or something like that. Like famously, years ago, I used to work in travel, and people who did tour leading at this company I used to work for called Journey Latin America used to talk about how funny it was when people were on a tour because they surrendered nearly all their autonomy. God, there was a brilliant anecdote. I'll tell it quickly. One time they were on a bus, I can't remember, on some really shady part of Colombia or Chiapas in southern Mexico or something like that. And the bus got held up by some banditos, some Sendero Luminoso types. And they were asking everyone for money.
Yeah.
And all the people on the tour were going up to the tour leader, like, how much should I give them? And then one person, I swear I'm not just imagining this, one person, and they said, I don't know, 500 pesos or whatever. And they went, I've only got 1,000 peso note. Do you think they'll give me change? I don't think that's apocryphal. I'm pretty sure that actually happened. Anyway, the point of the anecdote is that AI is equivalent to being on one of those tours where you rely too heavily on the tour leader and you're suspending a lot of your, and these are people who quite possibly were used to thinking for themselves.
Yeah.
But the more you go on a tour rather than just go backpacking by yourself, which I always used to love to do when I was younger, and it's a real drag and you stay in shitholes, but you got that lovely feeling of having your whole world on your back, being completely self-reliant. And that's the metaphor I'm trying to say. I think you need to be self-reliant inside your own head as much as possible.
I mean, this has been going on for a long time. I think that this started off actually with the onset of the search engine, really, and the internet, in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, that there's people's ability to sort of retain information. It's not a core skill anymore, that started to go. If you start using ChatGPT to write essays and structure them and give you ideas, you're not going to do it yourself. If you don't go to the gym, you're not going to have big biceps. It's not a surprise. It shouldn't take top researchers to point it out. But the cheeky conceit of that article was that if AI is making us more stupid, then AI superintelligence becomes a lot easier to achieve, doesn't it? Because maybe this is Sam Altman's
the threshold's lower.
This is Sam Altman's plan all along, is to make people really dumb, and then it's easier to get AI to take over. But the other worry that I think is really close to our profession, and this is directly in the kind of journalism world, is if more and more of this content that is produced, that if more and more of it is actually coming out of generative AI systems rather than people, what's the generative AI training itself on? The generative AI, when it first came along, only had human content to train itself on. If it gets to the point where people aren't if you're not writing stories anymore, Scott, because you've been taken out of the workforce, because obviously we've seen the impact, one of the impacts of generative AI is that you get this reliance on chatbots to access information, rather than people
Yeah.
going to a search engine and going straight into the link. You see this on Google, that you type something in nowadays and it comes up with a Gemini summary at the top. You read that and you don't go to the telecoms.com link that's below that, which is where it's got its information
Yeah.
from. But if that results in people not working for journalism titles anymore in the future, let's say, where does the generative AI get its information from?
Yes. So then it becomes this entirely sort of self-eating snake.
It becomes a
type of
self-eating
thing.
snake. It's feeding
Yeah.
off itself. If fewer people are generating content, the generative AI is having to feed off itself. Yeah.
Just
And
improves on
one other
itself,
point,
yeah.
one other point I make. I'm always saying that AI couldn't do this podcast, but we couldn't do this podcast if we weren't writing those stories
No.
during the week.
Well, I mean, and now I don't know. Like maybe somebody in 2021, 25 is looking back at the last 100 years, and most of the content that's online, or most of the world's knowledge output has come from Claude and GPT, whatever it is.
So there's no new knowledge.
Well, I mean, we don't know where AI is going to move, but
That's
are we
true,
happy
because
with,
it will get involved in R&D.
are we happy with that? Are we happy with a world
No.
where it's not coming from Dostoevsky and Orwell and Einstein anymore? It's coming from generative AI. That's a very weird situation to be in, but it seems like the natural consequence of not doing anything to put any brakes on this and not thinking about it. It's where it started to move to.
Well, in the
obviously.
R&D thing, Eureka comes from, I think it was Archimedes,
Yeah.
just getting in a bath and seeing the displacement of water or something like that. Maybe I'm mixing up.
Well, it was
ancient
Archimedes.
Greek things.
Yeah,
Okay,
it was. But those big breakthroughs.
But those Eureka moments.
Yeah, we don't know if generative AI or any kind of AI can do that at the moment,
Quite.
obviously. But
or Isaac Newton having an apple drop in
but do
front
we
of him.
want it doing that? Do you want to live in a world where what are people doing at that point? That's the problem. What are people doing?
Yeah, so
then?
there's two distinct sub-arguments there, and I'm gonna move on from them because we've got one more thing we want to cover and we've got to shoot off in a sec. There's the practicality, there's the pragmatic side, and then there's the more emotive side.
Yeah.
So there's the pragmatic side, will it be as good? And now, if the answer to that, will it be as good or better, as people like Sam Altman will insist, then we move on to the more emotive side, which is this what we want, or is this fucking dystopian?
Yeah.
I'm still focusing my arguments more on the pragmatic side, just
Well, I'm
because.
not even sure it's emotive. The consequences of the apologists for AI will keep coming out with this line that it will create jobs somewhere, and and don't worry about it.
When I say emotive, I don't mean it's irrational. I'm not trying to discount it or belittle it.
Yeah.
I'm just characterising the argument. That's all. And an emotive can include tons of people being unemployed and all the civil grief that will come thereafter. But I'm just separating that from the more
Jobs.
yeah, and the more specific analytical assessment of the capabilities of AI.
I mean,
that's all.
the job side of it, which is in that story as well. Because
Yeah, I was just going to shout it out. You basically said over 10 years, operators, you've got an aggregated
I do.
thing of top 20 or 20 tier 1 operators,
I mean,
and you said over 10 years their aggregate headcount's fallen by about a quarter.
Yeah. I mean, I try and do an update on that once a year, and I don't just want to keep writing the story that says this year 51,000 jobs.
Well, if
went.
that's where
So you
the
try and
data's
make it
going.
a bit more interesting,
Mm.
and wrap some other stuff that's going on in there. And I think I said in that story that most of those job cuts that have happened. So you're talking about 500,000 job cuts, I think, more or less, 450,
Yeah.
somewhere between 450,000 and 500,000.
476.
Yeah, since 2015, at these 20 telcos that I've been tracking, which were at the time in 2015 when I started sort of doing it, they were the biggest telcos in the Americas and Europe. Well, biggest telcos with headquarters, I should say, in the Americas and Europe. So you have companies in there like Vion, which apparently has now moved its headquarters to Dubai. But it's still in the list, obviously. I still sort of keep it there. But it would obviously cover AT&T, Verizon, Vodafone, Deutsche Telekom, all the big hitters. It doesn't cover people like Deutsche Telekom, China Mobile, China Telecom, some of the Asian ones.
Because they're not very...
They're harder to... Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the direction of travel has just been every year it's down, and it's quite steep drops in some cases. And none of that really so far has had much to do with AI. It's to do with earlier forms of automation. You were saying earlier, let's not mix up automation with AI. It's to do with standard efficiency measures. It's to do with getting rid of middle management. It's to do with divestment activities. It's to do with relying more heavily on third-party suppliers.
But some of it will be the same process that Ericsson's been on, which is we're making less money, so we've got to resize.
But the scary thing is that it's gone down that much, and now people are talking about AI as a path to get to like 10,000 less jobs just from AI, as Philip Jansen said, and Alison Kirkby at BT's pretty much inherited that.
So if we're down a quarter over 10 years, there's no reason to assume we won't be down by a half over 20 years.
Yeah.
Or more.
Or more with AI, who knows? I mean, there's some people are really dystopian about this recently. There's been there are a few stories in the press recently that are really quite scary, things coming out, which we can talk about in the pub later. But
well, yeah, and on that note, we have an appointment with various people in the pub. We're so fucking popular.
Yeah.
But
are we going to do another one then?
Well, we haven't got long. I mean, we could not bother. We were going to talk about City Fibre, but we've only got about 10 minutes left.
I can very, very briefly.
Yeah, why don't you summarise it, and then we just won't dig. We won't just drill down into it. This is normally the spot where my self-indulgent piece gets 10 minutes.
Well, I'll do a very quick one.
I'm
not even going to do a self-indulgent one. So, City Fibre, why is it important? City Fibre had an announcement on Monday. It's a story I wrote on Monday this week. You know, you're always thinking, oh shit, what am I going to write on Monday? Fortunately,
some actual news.
And I often don't write news up these days. Just sort of leave it to other people.
Because you're more like news analysis.
Yeah, but City Fibre had this big announcement that and I think the FT had actually got the scoop on it. Credit to the FT on the Sunday. That they'd got a refinancing of 2.3 billion. So they'd warned in their annual report, the last annual report they did, which was 2023, they'd warned there that they were going to run out of funds in September this year. Because I should properly introduce City Fibre for people who don't have a clue who they are. They're a UK. They would not want to be called an altnet. Probably.
Craig Mesh doesn't like that.
But they're one of the companies that has sprung up as an alternative to BT and Virgin Media O2, who are investing heavily in fibre infrastructure.
And there's been a lot of sort of hedge fund and VC and general speculative money going into fibre.
So there's not hundreds, but there's certainly over 100 companies in the UK that have been putting money into fibre rollout, partly as a result of a sort of relaxation of regulations, and it's become easier for companies to do it, partly because it was perceived, I think, during the sort of COVID era to be quite a sort of like the idea of being a fibre investor was more attractive than putting your money into other areas. So there was a kind of sense by like investors with a kind of long-term perspirp.
Exactly, a long-term thing. You spend it now and it's going to keep paying dividends over decades.
And the UK government was quite keen on this because they wanted BT to be Openreach, I should say, the bit of BT that's the sort of networks arm, to be incentivised to kind of roll out fibre, because the UK was actually very, very far behind other parts of Europe on fibre rollout at that stage. And the one that sort of emerged as the sort of in the vanguard of all that is really City Fibre. They're the if you talk to people who sort of say what's the market going to look like in 2029, 2030? They go, well, it might just be BT, Virgin Media 2 and City Fibre having done a lot of consolidation and picked up various other assets.
That's expensive.
And that's what they're going to do, apparently. So they've basically raised another 2.3 billion in.
Although
it's debt and equity.
A lot of it comes with caveats.
A lot of it comes with caveats.
Only about $500 million of it is just outright wedge. Is that right?
Well, there's a debt. There's a debt portion, there's an equity portion, there's what they call an accordion fund. I never heard of that before.
I know. Cool.
I like the sound of that.
Oh, but you hear about various other ways of characterising sort of flexible debt facilities, and it's all just wanky ways of going, the cash is there if we need it.
Well, the accordion thing, I think, is specifically to do with M&A.
Right.
How much
for takeover? You wrote that in your piece.
Activity.
So that's 800 mil.
800 million, yeah. And they're going to, they've done a bit of this already. They bought a company called Lit Fibre.
Good name.
And the opportunity for them is to try and go and basically take over some of this. It's very disjointed market. It's like a jigsaw puzzle where every company is one bit of that jigsaw, and some of them have no customers at all, and they're in some shitty little bit of the UK, and they're running out of money. And what City Fibre could potentially do is try and stitch this together into some kind of...
Which feels like it's got to happen eventually.
Yeah.
There's got to be some consolidation.
Yeah. And I mean, a few people this year have been saying that a lot of these altnets are really struggling now. They're going to get out of business. So this is the opportunity for City Fibre now that it's been refinanced and it's already got a kind of a reasonable footprint, is to try and come along and do it. It's going to be quite hard to do, I think. personally. It's going to be a really hard task because it's not like you can just go and buy.
Well, that 800 million accordion facility for takeover, I mean, you could blow that pretty quickly.
You could blow it pretty quickly. And also, who do you buy? This is the problem. They're not going to want to buy people who overlap, presumably, with their own network, unless they've got loads of customers.
They're quite big on London South East, aren't they? City Fibre.
They're not in London.
Oh, well, it must be confusing
I think
with
they've
someone.
stayed out of London. They're in some of the other big cities, I think, but they've actually stayed out of London.
Okay.
Community Fibre is one of the ones in London, and a couple of others.
Hyperoptic, are they in London?
I think Hyperoptic is more almost like countryside stuff.
Okay,
but,
I don't know what I'm thinking of.
But yeah, anyway, that was the story. That was the kind of broadband piece from the start of the week. And see, I've been.
All right, well, I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting that the investors, everyone's known that Goldman Sachs has always had a big piece of City Fibre.
Yeah.
I didn't know that Mubadala, which is a UAE investment company, which is a massive investment vehicle.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been writing about them since about 20 years ago. I was writing about the creation of a company called Global Foundries, which was actually AMD when AMD had its own fabs. They spun off the fabs, and a lot of the funding behind Global Foundries, which is still going, but I don't think it's really set the world on fire. But I remember I learnt about Mubadala then, and basically there's all these Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds. They've just got all this oil cash, and we just don't know what to do with all this fucking cash. So they're just always looking for places to put it rather than just leaving it sitting in the sand.
Yeah,
and there's so much money in these oil-rich Middle Eastern Gulf countries, sovereign wealth funds, because of course they're very centralised, most of those Gulf countries. Most of the money just ends up in the hands of a few people, doesn't it?
It does. So might as well take a punt on something.
Yeah, exactly. And
I think they could take a punt on me if they want.
Yeah, put some of your patient capital in behind the bar for me.
I mean, it might work out well for them. I don't know.
But yeah, Goldman Sachs and Mubadala are two of the biggest names in sort of venture capital. So this is patient capital.
Yeah.
Which is good. I mean, you hear some stories about some like VC types being incredibly impatient about their exit, and like they'll invest, but then they almost asset strip and fuck the company up because they're so desperate to get their exit and their return. Whereas investing in City Fibre and investing in fibre on the whole, the returns are over decades. So I think it's good news that the money's there. It'll be interesting to see how City Fibre spends it. It's kind of interesting that they need this 2.3 billion extra wedge.
Yeah,
I don't know what that says about them or the broader market. We're going to get another.
They had quite big losses in the last in their earnings. I mean, they claimed to be profitable this year at the start of the year, but that was at the EBITDA level. So I think there was a bit of it wasn't quite. I mean, the net loss level, I bet they're still like racking up fairly big losses, but net income level.
We should be getting. Let me just look at my little podcast spreadsheet. We should be getting someone who's been on before, but they were wearing a different hat when they were last on. Yeah, in fact, I'll wrap up now.
Yeah.
So we might not do one next week because Pierre is now clearing off again, as he does. We might have the opportunity to do one remotely. I'd be interested to know from our audience whether they think they'd rather have a remote one than not one at all. I'm up for that, and we'll see how it goes with Pierre's responsibilities. But in the week after, again, I'm not going to name them in case they have to bail at the last minute. But we should have someone else who's got a lot of insight into the UK fibre fixed line and fibre scene. So that seems like a good place to park it. But we might pick that up again and ask that guest about it. And he's going to be a direct competitor of theirs, but I know him and I think he'll be even-handed about the whole situation, so that should be good insight. So I think I'll leave it there. We won't keep our pub mates waiting. So yeah, just to remind everyone, we might not do one next week, but then we will do one the week after. And then we'll have a couple of weeks, and then Pierre's going to have his main holiday. He's French, so he has about 10 holidays a year.
I'm just like not in the country, but I'm working.
So. Oh, you're working, but you're in over the channel.
Yeah.
But then you are going to have your proper holiday, so the second half of August you're going to get fuck all out of us.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've got 2 or 3 for you in between. So I'll wrap it up there. I'll say thanks a lot for listening and make sure you join us for those.